Welcome to a new video in my 7.25" gauge railway series, and well, as you can see, the body shell has received the first coat of paint yesterday. That was a big milestone because I really wanted to get this done. I could see some superficial rust on the panels, so I wanted to, well, give it the first coat sooner than later. And also on the last week I was, really busy cleaning up all the Bondo details, especially places like, I think I already mentioned this before. So these are like two plates, and I just wanted to smooth out the transition between the main body shell and that plate, and the same around the doors and also around the front windows. So I got these two-part Bondo. I was like smearing that in with my finger, and I was sanding it, and yeah, so this is the type of the job that I really hate doing. So there's like this fiddly that takes time and a lot of effort. So even though it is not perfect, and you can see places, for example here I have a little hole that I didn't fill, and this place where the Bondo did, well, yeah, that didn't get enough filler, probably a few more here, but I think I'm just going to leave it like this. And also probably what you have noticed, I don't think I have a footage of this, but I got handrails here at the doors, and also a couple of grab rails just below the window. I made these a long time ago, and for stuff like that, and also for the arms of the pantograph, I was using 4mm, not stainless, galvanized rods that I usually use to hang the false ceiling or the suspended ceiling. So they are really cheap and they are easy to work with. Of course, the issue is that when I solder it, I should really get the galvanizing off before I soldering, but I didn't. So it was giving off all sorts of fumes. And yeah, the difficulty is just to get into all these crooks and crevices. You can see here that that part didn't get enough paint, and there, but again, that's only the first coat, so I should be able to fix that. Also, I'm not really sure what I will be doing with details such as this one. So there is a little bit of gap. I didn't put filler here. So I'm not really sure how I can, get material in, paint in there. So maybe I just need to go through with a brush and then brush these edges off. So make sure they are filled with paint, so it's not going to rust inside. But yeah, that's it. And the next stop is going to be the bogies. Again, finishing them, and I think that should be all for now. And of course, now I have a couple of build footage. I mostly use my GoPro with the new gimbal as a stand to take pictures or time lapses and videos. So I have a couple of footage there working on various bits and pieces, so I can give you a few more details when we go through those footages. If I want to give some more criticism to my bodywork and paint skills, you probably can see the joint edges here that I didn't manage to cover with the Bondo, and also I have this angle iron here, which is going to, so that's here, that is going to support the body on the chassis, and then in some cases you can see the very fine deformation caused by the welding. But yeah, but again, I just had no patience to Bondo this whole piece and then sand it down. So I think I'm going to use some stickers and some, nameplates and some other details, which is going to break up this surface, so it's not going to be noticeable. And again, looking from a usual 10-foot distance, I don't think that you can really see that anyway. So this first footage that I have is about fixing the central headlight, because for some reason I definitely had this hole on the drawing, on the CAD drawing, but for some reason it didn't get cut with the parts. So I don't know what really happened here. So I first of all, I had to get this really big step drill bit to drill this center hole. You don't see that And then once that was big enough to fit the LED light, I just put two, what is it? I think it was wooden matches, so I can just put yellow paint, white paint on them. So as I push them in, or I fit them where they are going to be, they are going to leave a mark for me that I need to drill. So those are just M4 holes to hold this, the M4 screw, which is going to hold this plastic piece, which again is going to hold the LED light. So that's a 3D printed piece that I designed, and it has the big enough hole inside to hold this small LED light or cabinet light. I think it's like a kitchen cabinet light. I did a whole video on the things that I used for this build, and what are the different bits and pieces that I purchased. So it was drilling a couple of holes, and at the end I was able to test it, and it was working. And it's a 1 watt LED, so it's not going to be a huge floodlight, but I think for a for a loco like this, if I happen to drive it in the evening, it should give a decent illumination. So I think that's going to be fine. And next I started touching up the details with this putty. I mean, I've already done loads of these, but I wanted an extra layer around the doors and the windows, and it is just like a 2-part putty or bondo. So I was trying to mix up the small batches because it usually sets quite quickly. And I couldn't really find any other method than just use my fingers and sort of like try to smear it into the gaps, and try to not do too much so it doesn't ooze out on the surfaces. And of course, once it starts to harden, then it makes it really difficult to sort of like smear a very smooth surface. Yeah, and I think it was generally really hot. That has probably speeded up the curing process as well. So maybe it would have been easier if I do this over the winter, but well, this is what I have. So what I ended up doing is I was using my finger just to move or form this bondo or the putty, and then I allowed for about like 10-15 minutes, and I would come back with a scraper and I would scrape any of the excess off, because it was much easier to do it on a half hardened state than once it fully cures. Then you really have to use like a small hammer to break off any of the old pieces. And I guess maybe I could have done like a second or third coat, but again, sanding these down was always also really, really difficult. So what I ended up doing is I took like these small pieces of sandpaper, and I wrapped it around. I think I just found an Allen key which sort of like was a good enough shape, and that was my let's say shape that I used to sand the hardened bondo or the hardened putty. And I think it was fine. And then of course I also need to sand around the windows and the doors, just to sand off any of the excess that might have oozed out and got onto the side of the plate or anything that I didn't want to have. So yeah, as I said, this was probably the most laborious task of the whole build. And yeah, I just don't really have the patience for this type of work, so hence this is not going to be like a perfect bodywork. And again, what I'm filming here is not the first time I'm doing this. This was probably like at least a second or third coat with this putty. So again, I've spent already a lot of time on this. So maybe if you are designing your own loco, maybe try to think about or come up with a design which doesn't require all these bondo and putty. Or maybe I just need better tools so I can do less manual sanding. I could have used some other tools. In fact, previously I've used it's not the orbiter sander, I think it is vibrating sander that I used, which comes with this triangular sanding pads, and that helps a lot. But again, in some cases the space is really, really tight, so you can't really fit. So yeah, you just have to use your hand. Or for example, these bands that you see on the side of the engine. So the way I sanded the putty down along those is I have a circle file, and I was just sort of like holding that against the band, and that gave the side of the file gave that sort of like nice sanded surface. So yeah, try to use as many tools as you can possibly have, because yeah, it takes a lot of time to do this. And next I started welding some stuff, and previously I noticed that one of the grills was slightly misaligned, so I think probably wasn't seated properly when I did the first initial welding, and I noticed from the outside it was a little bit crooked, so I grind off the weld and I was welding this again. So that was just one small piece that I needed to do. And the final activity before I can do the paint was actually to fix the handrails. I decided that I want to weld them onto the bodywork, and so I don't have to like glue them afterwards. It makes the painting a little bit harder, but I thought probably it's going to be more permanent this way. So anyway, I use these small blocks as spacers, and I hold the these grab rails by some pliers, and I started welding it from the inside. I was trying to do some really small tack welds, and as I mentioned previously, these are 4mm galvanized rods that are usually used to suspend the suspended ceiling. I like working with these because they are really easy to bend, and let's say if the paint is not perfect, but at least like not around the welds, but for the rest of the material it's galvanized, so it's not going to rust, but still also I think it's a little bit easier to paint as well. So there are pros and cons, but anyway, I decided to use these. So you can see occasionally these fumes up. That's basically the fumes from that's the impact of welding galvanized steel, which is not nice. And I think you should use muriatic acid to clean off the galvanizing before you weld them, but yeah, I didn't do that. So it was fuming, and by the way, there was like a big fan in the background which was trying to get the air clean in the garage. So I was going through these fixing them with the pliers, and then I tack welded them and I moved on. So I have 2 handrails at each door, so that's 8, and there are these grab rails just below the windows. I think I've seen quite a few locos have these. I think this is for the crew to hold on to if they want to wash the windows or something like that. I think it's a good additional detail. It just makes the loco a little bit more interesting, so I decided to do these. So these was the things that I was welding on, and then I think on the next day, which I don't have footage of, I just used a cut-off wheel just to cut off the excess material which was in the cab, inside, because at some point I want to also have some cab details, and I don't want these these stubs to stick out too much. So yeah, I was just grinding off the excess, and I think that was pretty much the last step which I had before it was ready for painting. Before I could start the painting, I obviously needed to clean all the surfaces, so I was using paint thinner or some sort of thinner just to clean off all the surfaces, just to make sure that they are free of any grease. And funny thing, it's this thinner started to thin the bondo or the putty as well. I'm not sure if it's supposed to do that, but anyway, so I tried to make it light over the putty surfaces, and right at the end I also used some towels to clean up some of these surfaces, and there was still a lot of dust, like iron dust inside. So again, I used some cleaning cloth to clean up mostly in the inside, so just to make sure that the metal is as clean as possible. And then once that was done, I started preparing for painting. So I was doing all this outside on the driveway. So I dragged the train out, and I also started to move all the equipment, the compressor, and a small stand that I can do the paint mixing on. And yeah, that was it. So here I have a small footage of me mixing the paint, And as I mentioned previously, when I was painting the chassis, retrospectively I realized that the reason painting was so difficult because I didn't thin the paint, so I was using paint thinner now, and I didn't really have like a ratio in mind. What is the perfect ratio? So I was like, I think like 1/3 or 1/4, and I was using again a piece of stick just to mix the paint and the thinner in the bucket. And yeah, that was it, and it was ready for paint. I think what I'm going to do next time, if I do the next paint or the next batches, is try to only fill the bucket like sort of halfway, because it was, you know, pretty damn heavy in the beginning. So it was, I think it just painting just became much easier towards the end, when there was less of these you know, weight at the end of my hand. And I'm using this green paint. This is just a general green which is used in most locos on the inside. Well, at least the ones that I've been on in Hungarian Railways. I don't know whether this is universal. So I thought I'm going to use this as an undercoat. And so in the inside of the chassis, I would probably have 2 coats. On the outside, I would just have 1 coat, and then I would, on the outside, I would just go with the finer color, and that's going to be the 2nd and probably the 3rd coat. And yeah, on one of the videos I have seen this technique that use a masking tape to create some sort of funnel so the paint doesn't go onto the side of the bucket. It sort of works. I mean, the paint doesn't get on the side of the bucket or the paint can, so that's nice, but that's all it does. So yeah. And finally, the painting. And as I said, I had issues in the past with the consistency of the paint, and I think even this time it was a little bit difficult. Maybe I couldn't get the thinner and the paint mixed in the bucket of the paint gun properly, because it was going really difficult in the beginning. I was starting to fiddle with the 2 knobs that I have on the spray gun, and towards the end, sort of like halfway, it was going really good. So I think I need to spend more time thinning the paint in the bucket, and just to make sure that it's, you know, properly mixed. And definitely I'm not going to fiddle with the knobs anymore. So the other thing that I had to pay attention is that, you know, stop from time to time, wait for the compressor to fill up air, because I have probably the smallest compressor that I could buy in my local home improvement center, and I think it is pretty much struggling. So as I was painting, I think I was painting for about 45 minutes total, and the compressor was on all the time. So it was constantly trying to, you know, match the uses of the paint gun. And I definitely noticed that if I was like spraying big surfaces with, you know, like a lot of paint, then at the end I just didn't get enough paint because the pressure was so slow. So I ended up, like, you know, stopping just a little bit. I also looked at the gauge just to make sure that I have around like 4 bars of pressure before I continue. At least I could rest my arms as well. But I think it worked pretty well at the end. So yeah, I had enough pressure. I have sort of like a good spray and a good coverage. So at least this is something that I learned today. And then hopefully I can just, you know, continue with that. And the next coats are going to be much more easier and a lot more even. But I'm actually quite happy how the whole thing turned out. Probably the most time I spent on is painting those small grills, because I want to make sure that they get, you know, even coverage all around. Otherwise they are just going to rust and I won't be able to do anything with them. So I was spraying a lot of paint from the inside and from the outside. I was trying to spray from the below up and also from above down, just to make sure that I get all the surfaces painted. These are like, I think about like 2 or 3 centimeters long. So there is a decent amount of surface that is really hard to reach. But I guess only time will tell if I manage to get the, you know, the coverage good enough. So I think that will be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.